Okay, so in a way from the title, it is obvious that our presentation follows up on what Borjan initiated, at least in terms of how legal structures operate in the Western Balkans. But as you will see, it tackles the problem from a completely different perspective, which is related to the concept of legal culture, and basically provides, in a way, answers to the question about who respects the law and why in 6 countries in the Western Balkans, in Southeast Europe. Basically, it's a co-authored paper by me, Nenad, and Misha. Me and Nenad will do the presentation. I will present the theoretical aspects. I will explain the hypothesis of our research. Nenad will comment on the results, and also Misha, who is here as well, can join probably later in during the debate. So, what is the main point of this endeavor? We want to try to provide an answer to the question of whether there is a common pattern of a so-called Western Balkan legal culture based on the study of these 6 examined cases. So it's Albania, Bosnia, Kosovo, Macedonia, Montenegro, and Serbia. And it basically follows up a plethora of research that has been done all around the world, measuring law abidingness in different countries all over the world. But as far as to our knowing, what is interesting, although most of these studies are related to North America, to the United States, especially Western Europe also, but as far as the Western Balkans is concerned, this is the first attempt to measure legal culture in the Western Balkans in a comparative perspective, in a way. It starts from the assumption, which was also explained by Peja at the first session, of whether there are political, historical, cultural similarities among the Western Balkan societies, mainly post-communist rule, post-communist experiences, so on and so forth, Ottoman legacies, different types of legacies, that would generate relatively homogeneous popular dispositions towards the law and legal obedience in general. And as Peja also mentioned, and as you will see from our findings, this is not always the case. We measured 3 different sets of variables, and which are mainstream in the literature. And basically we assume that the socioeconomic positioning of respondents, general and institutional trust, and their disposition towards EU rules, that they will induce some shared patterns of legal consciousness across all these examined cases. So, briefly to explain what is legal culture, it is a very well explored academic phenomenon. It was coined in the 1970s by the famous legal and political theorist Lawrence Friedman, who practically says that in countries, in regions, there are patterns of legal culture, which mean that there are those parts of general culture and of political culture more precisely, such as customs, opinions, ways of doing and thinking, that bend social forces towards or away from the law and in particular ways. So in a way, legal culture is connected to how society, what are the responses of society towards the law and towards legal framework. So ideas, attitudes, expectations, opinions about the law, which are held by individuals in some society. More precisely, how people that are part of legal frameworks, but also how the common population reacts to law, to legal frameworks, or if we borrow the terminology from our project, to formal institutions or to formal legal institutions. So practically it explores different dimensions of this interaction between law, legal systems, and different social groups. And basically there are two dimensions of legal culture. So-called internal and external, also called legal culture of outsiders or legal culture of insiders, popular or professional legal culture. What does this mean, this division mean? Internal, they both practically are connected to these differences in attitudes and behavior towards the law and the legal system. However, the distinction is whether these attitudes are attitudes of legal professionals, lawyers, judges, so people who are part of the legal, who work in the legal system, or the general population. So, in this sense, external legal culture would be the behavior, opinion, knowledge, attitudes towards the law and the legal system, which is shared by common citizens. And our study practically measures external legal culture. So it measures law abidingness among the common population in the Western Balkans. So as a theoretical term, there's several concepts which are practically trying to explain the same thing. Also, a famous American political scientist, Susan Silby, speaks about legal consciousness. Basically, how conscience among common population is developed through their experiences, personal experiences with law and the legal system as such. And there are several disciplinary takes on how you measure legal culture: qualitative, quantitative, anthropological, psychological, but also empirical ways of measurement. And our study is practically embedded in the third one, so-called political science aspect of things, based on public opinion measurements. So, what are the factors the variables that we measure, and what are the hypotheses that we have formulated in relation to these variables? They're all embedded in this Western Balkans context, which has been used by our project as one of the main assumptions. We have this emphasis on this backlash between internal and external demands for legal modernization on one hand, and traditional culture and a political and a legal system which is very much, as Borjan has also argued, resistant to change. So in a way, it communicates to two important aspects of our project. First is this our main intention to somehow decipher this interaction between formal institutions, in this case formal legal, most of them are actually legal institutions, and informal practices which can be found on a societal level, on a grassroots level in a way. And second, it contributes to this micro perspective which we are developing of measuring interactions between formal institutions and how common people experience them, especially in terms of experiences of formal institutionalization that comes from the EU, which is an aspect which hasn't been really well elaborated in Europeanization literature as well. This micro perspective, usually this literature covers the macro and the meso perspective of things, as Peja explained in the first session. So, three types of factors, which are quite well known in the literature. First one, socioeconomic predictors, so-called background demographic characteristics of citizens. Practically most of the studies have shown that the social strata to which different groups of citizens belong can, in many cases, be a key factor for how they conceive their attitudes and ideas towards social phenomena and towards the law in general. So we expect that individuals with higher socioeconomic positioning will have more positive attitudes towards law abidingness. Again, a standard measurement, individuals with higher educational achievement should be more positive towards respecting the law. And we introduced a third one, a third variable, which could be quite important for the social context of the Western Balkans, and that is belonging to ethnic majorities. In many other parts of the world, many researchers have argued that belonging to an ethnic minority, basically, or belonging to an ethnic majority in a multicultural environment, those who belong to ethnic majorities have more positive attitudes towards the law in relation to those who belong to ethnic minorities. So we wanted to explore this phenomenon as well. Second factor, second variable, is trust, divided into two different types of trust: general and institutional trust. Also, studies have shown that people who have trust in other people, practically that type of trust increases the reliance on rules, as they do not feel the need to rely on informal groups in order to get things done. They feel more comfortable when they have a larger group of people who they trust. So they are more prone to obeying the law. Second, institutional trust is self-explanatory in a way, because legal frameworks are operationalized by institutions, formal institutions, and in that way they form an inseparable symbiotic relationship in a way. What does this mean? How people perceive democratic institutions, and especially law enforcement agencies, it could have a determinant effect on their attitudes towards the law. So our hypothesis is that individuals with higher confidence in other people are more prone to obeying the law, and individuals with higher confidence in institutions of the political system are more prone to obeying the law. And finally, the third factor hasn't been that much explored in the academic literature, at least not in this way, and that is the disposition towards EU rules. And since this is one of the key variables of our project, we wanted to see how people respond to this EU-induced rule of law narrative that they are exposed to. So other studies in Eastern Europe have shown that people in the accession process, whose countries are in the accession process, support this concept of legal borrowing, also known in the literature as legal transplants, because they think that they will improve their society and in a way their way of living. On the other hand, the whole process of EU accession and EU enlargement is based on transposition of formal rules in a way. Some of them are more formal, some of them not that much maybe, but it is based to a large extent to transposition of laws, which are in a way translated to the candidate, to the societies of the candidate countries. And this harmonization with EU law is seen, at least by the experts, as a modernizing agent in these societies. So we wanted to see whether the common people pick up cues from such narratives, since they're bombarded with that. EU strategy, rule of law, most important of all, practically the whole compliance, effects of compliance are measured through this compliance with EU law. So the corresponding hypothesis is that the individuals that support EU accession and compliance with EU rules would have more positive attitudes towards law abidingness in comparisons to the Eurosceptics. And in a way, this is this theoretical part of our study. And now Nenad will continue with the research design and the findings, the main results that we have.
This one in the pocket.
Okay, I hope this is okay. So what was the research design? It was quite simple. We used two models. Basically, we can call the first model the negative model and the second one the positive model. We used binary logistic regressions, analysis on two levels, regional, control for the countries, and a second analysis which is performed on state level. We all know, at least the people that were in the project, that we had a huge database of cases, n equals 6040. And it was a three-stage stratified random sampling that takes into consideration regional population distribution. I won't go into detail, I will just say that we won't present all the tables, all the numbers, all the graphs that we have. This will be included in a paper that we are preparing. I will just skip later on, just to explain several things firstly, but skip later on to the conclusions because country by country it's too complicated and it's too much data. So the first model would be called the negative model when the dependent variable is a composite variable of several, in fact 6 questions that relate to the concept of legal culture in different aspects, all related to negative aspects of circumventing or breaking the law. So disposition of respondents to circumvent laws in order to achieve something in life, preference of informal laws to formal ones, legal relativism, i.e. disobedience to bad laws, level of social conformism with the other member of the community, readiness to compromise with what is right in order to make a living, and readiness to return favors no matter what. So you see, all 6 indicators point to something that either relates to circumventing or breaking the law one way or the other, or some kind of legal relativization. But this is combined. The Cronbach alpha is sufficient statistically in order to be combined and to present one dependent variable. And the second model would be the positive model where only one question is the dependent variable, only one question. And the question is, one must always obey the law even if one will have a problem in doing that. So the variable was recoded to retain the extreme agreement as 1 and any other level of that show some kind of not disobedience but taking this statement relatively or trying to relativize the statement was coded as 0. So basically it was, that's why it's binary. So first a little bit of descriptive statistics just as a teaser, I would say, before we go to the models. This is not related to the models, this is just frequencies. When it comes to informality over law, Bosnia and Herzegovina is the country with the biggest disposition towards breaking or circumventing the law when you ask people directly. Would you circumvent or break the law? So this is descriptive statistics. This doesn't relate to the models. We'll go back to this data. This is just an introduction. Positive answers, 82%, 12% negative, followed by Macedonia, 81.6 positive answers, Kosovo, 76, Albania, 74.3, Serbia, 77.1, and Montenegro, 77.3. Now, the second slide on the descriptive statistics says, regards the question, law should be respected under any circumstance, and please, let's not make a mistake, there is no cognitive dissonance in both cases. Because you'll find the same people that say, okay, you need to obey the law, saying that you need to sometimes circumvent it. And we tried, me, Misha, and Ivan were trying to kind of interpret this, and it's kind of understanding that people know that law should be interpreted. Then again, they know that it's impossible to implement, to obey it, or kind of go along with it in any possible situation. So there is no cognitive dissonance, in fact, in both questions. The most law-abiding respondents are located in Serbia. 92.3% of positive answers, followed by Montenegro, 92%, Bosnia and Herzegovina, 87.8%, Albania, 87%, Kosovo, 84.5%, and Macedonia, 83.7% of positive answers, 16.3% negative. Okay, so 3 slides on our discussions, so summarize. So this will be very brief. What turned out to be a good predictor, statistical predictor, what turned out not to be a very good statistical predictor, and I'm saying again a little disclaimer, country by country is rather complicated when we analyze. We won't go so deep, but we do have the data, so if anybody is interested, we can really share, we'll publish this. So our findings point that socioeconomic positioning is the strongest predictor of positive attitudes towards the law. So this hypothesis has been confirmed. Regionally favoring informality over rules or circumventing formal rules is negatively related with the increase in socioeconomic status. This means that respondents with more income, and then again, less social networks, or the size of network is smaller, personal network, and informal income would prefer to follow the law in the first model. In the second model, household income becomes less of a good predictor. It's not so statistically strong, while the other two remain to support our original hypothesis. On the level of countries, the pattern is less clear. It's a little bit more confusing. It is statistics at the end of the day, but on regional level, this is the overall conclusion. So, something that we didn't expect. And it goes along, it's not the same thing that Peja said this morning about informality champions, but it's very similar. Higher education is not is not a good predictor of law abidingness. So the fact that you're educated doesn't mean that you choose to implement or be prone to implementing these informal ways of getting ahead or getting things done, which is very interesting. It kind of goes along with what Peja said about informality champions and how people in big urban areas that deal with institutions have to find their way through the institutions and sometimes even revert to tactics that break or circumvent the law. So it is not a good predictor, which is very, very interesting. So kind of it's a nice coincidence. The hypothesis that members of ethnic minorities would be more positive towards circumventing formal laws has been only partially proven, only in the case of Macedonia. In none of the other cases it was statistically significant or proven to be relevant. Why? We kind of thought this through, and we think that the problem might be that the number of respondents from minorities in specific countries is probably too low to get something that's statistically significant. So this might be a problem of methodology, which of course, like any methodology, has its imperfections. You have to do a boosting sample, so-called boost sample, for minorities in order to see whether this is true or not. Maybe for in other phases of the project, maybe somewhere in the near future. And the hypothesis is rejected when the dependent variable is obeying law. So this is not, except the case of Macedonia, it turned out to be not true in this case. Interesting. Yeah, I'll be done in two. Generalized trust is a predictor only for the direct obedience to law, although weak predictor. However, it runs contrary to our hypothesis. People with trust in other people are less prone to agree that laws must be obeyed. So the more experience you have in life, the more people you meet, the less you want to obey the laws. This is kind of disappointing when it comes to our conclusions, but it turns out to be so. And trust in institution has a weak relation, although it's statistically significant. The hypothesis is proven, and individuals with more trust in institutions are more likely to agree that laws must be obeyed, which makes kind of perfect sense. Not a very strong predictor, but still a predictor that people that believe in institutions would also obey the law. Interestingly enough, about our little novelty in the last hypothesis, that hypothesis number 6 that Ivan mentioned, Eurosceptics, believing that EU rules are bad for national societies, are negatively related to law abidingness. So this is something that was confirmed. The more EU skeptic you are, the less you're prone to obeying the laws and more prone to circumventing or breaking the law, or having such perception at least. Positive relation between statements on compliance with EU rules and law abidingness in 3 cases: Montenegro, Albania, and Kosovo. So people that comply with EU rules tend to show more law abidingness, at least in 3 cases of the examined. So we tried not to make some kind of a mega conclusion for our presentation. We'll leave that for the discussion, since many things are open to interpretation, I would say. So maybe we can continue during the debate and try to kind of break down further the indicators. Thank you for your attention.